The word has a weight that other words don't, not heavy in the way of dramatic words. Tragedy, betrayal, loss. Heavy in the specific way of words that arrive quietly and stay permanently. Words that don't announce their damage, but simply settle into the structure of a person and become load-bearing before anyone notices. Burden. My mother used it first when I was 16, during an argument about money that had started over a school trip I had asked to attend, and that had escalated, in the way arguments do in households, operating under financial pressure, into something much larger than its origin. "You don't understand what it costs to keep you," she said. "You have no idea what a burden you are." My father used it differently, less explosive, more ambient. The sighs when bills arrived. The particular way he looked at the dinner table when I reached for a second portion. The comment he made when I was accepted to university. Not congratulations, but a careful, measured acknowledgement of what it was going to cost. For 13 years I had carried the word. The way you carry something you've been told is yours. Not because you chose it, but because enough people handed it to you that you stopped questioning whether it belonged. And then, on a Tuesday morning in November, I looked up from my desk to find my parents standing in the reception area of my office. Not called ahead, not scheduled, simply there. My mother with her hands clasped in front of her in the posture she adopted when she was preparing to ask for something she found difficult to ask for. My father with his eyes moving around the reception area with the specific quality of a man encountering something that contradicts a story he has believed for a long time. My name is Amara Osei. I am 33 years old, and this is the story of the word I carried for 13 years. And the Tuesday morning it was finally, completely, and permanently returned to sender. I grew up in a household that was not poor in the way of deprivation, but poor in the way of pressure. My parents had emigrated from Ghana when I was 3. My father, a trained engineer working a position several levels below his qualification, because the credential recognition process was slower than their need for income. My mother working administrative roles in healthcare that paid steadily, but not expansively. They had built a life that functioned. It simply functioned at a level of sustained effort that left very little room for anything that felt like extra. I was the extra, not because they did not love me. I want to be precise about this, because the story is not simple, and simple versions of it would be dishonest. My parents loved me. They fed me, clothed me, attended my school performances, reviewed my homework with the focused attention of people who understood that education was the architecture of the future they had crossed an ocean to give me access to. But love and resentment are not mutually exclusive. And the financial pressure of raising a child on 2 incomes that were never quite sufficient had produced, in my parents, a specific resentment that expressed itself in the particular language of burden. Not constantly, not cruelly, but consistently enough that the word had become the background frequency of my childhood. The school trip I couldn't go on at 16, the university discussion that had been about costs before it was about anything else. The summers I worked, because my parents made clear, without being asked, that the expectation of contribution began early. I had worked every summer from 15. I had taken every scholarship available. I had graduated from university with a finance degree and a debt load I had managed precisely because precision with money had been the survival skill my childhood had most effectively installed. What my parents had not installed, and what I had built despite the absence of it, was the belief that I was worth investing in. I had built it anyway, the hard way, by investing in myself so consistently and so deliberately that the returns made the argument for me, in a language I had learned, over time, was the only one that required no translation. Osei Financial Advisory had been operating for 5 years. I had founded it at 28 with 3 clients, a desk in a shared workspace, and the specific, focused energy of someone who has decided that the counter-argument to being called a burden is to build something that carries its own weight so visibly that the word becomes structurally impossible. We were a boutique wealth management and financial planning firm, not a large operation, but a precise one. 18 clients, all carefully selected, a staff of 7. A reputation in the immigrant professional community, specifically for understanding the particular financial complexity of people navigating wealth building across multiple countries, currencies, and cultural contexts. This was not an accident. I had built the firm for people whose financial lives looked like my parents had looked. Complex, cross-border, underserved by firms that didn't understand the specific architecture of those lives. I understood it because I had grown up inside it. I had built a practice around that understanding. In our 5th year, assets under management had crossed $40 million. I had not told my parents any of this, not from strategy, or not primarily. From the accumulated exhaustion of having tried, in the early years, to share what I was building with 2 people who received each update with the careful, slightly bewildered acknowledgement of parents who loved their daughter and had no framework for what she was describing. After the 3rd attempt, I had stopped trying and simply built. My parents knew I worked in finance. They did not know the shape of what that meant. I learned, the week before they appeared in my reception area, what had brought them there. Not from them. From my Aunt Abina, my mother's older sister, who had always been more direct than diplomatic, and who called me on a Wednesday evening with the specific tone she used when she was delivering information she considered necessary, regardless of whether the recipient had requested it. "Your father's business," she said. "You know he started the import business 3 years ago?" I knew. My father had left his engineering position at 58 and started a small import business bringing goods from Ghana. A venture my parents had mentioned with the particular pride of people embarking on something they had built themselves. I had followed its existence from a distance, the way I followed most things in my parents' life since the distance between us had become a practiced geography. "There are problems," Abina said, "financial problems. A supplier situation that has become a legal situation. They need help, Amara, real help. The kind that costs money they don't have and requires knowledge they don't have." I was quiet for a moment. "How serious?" I said. Abina told me. It was serious. I had 2 days between Abina's call and my parents' appearance in my reception area. 2 days to sit with a situation that contained more complexity than almost anything else in my professional life. Not because the problem itself was unusually complex, but because the people inside it were my parents, and my parents had spent 13 years handing me a word that I was now being asked to help them carry back from the edge it had brought them to. I thought about refusing. I want to be honest about that, because the story requires honesty and dishonest versions of it would serve no one. I thought about it for approximately 40 minutes on the Thursday evening after Abina's call, sat with the specific, understandable human impulse to let the people who called you a burden discover what the absence of your support feels like. Then I thought about my father's face. Not the face from the dinner table size or the university cost discussion. The face from earlier, from the age when I had still been small enough to sit on his shoulders at the market on Saturday mornings. On Saturday mornings, when the weight I represented was literal, and he carried it without comment, without complaint, with the easy strength of a man who had not yet learned to resent what he loved. I thought about that face. And then I picked up the phone and called my office manager and told her I was expecting walk-in visitors and to bring them directly to me when they arrived. They came on Tuesday morning at 9:47. I was at my desk reviewing a client portfolio when my office manager, a composed and perceptive woman named Ya, who had been with me since year 2, appeared in my doorway with the expression she used when something required my personal navigation. "Your parents are in reception," she said, quietly, without elaboration. "Send them in," I said. I closed the portfolio file. I stood up, I straightened my jacket, and I waited for the door to open. My mother came in first. She was 61 and had the posture she carried into difficult situations. Straight, composed, the bearing of a woman who had crossed an ocean and understood that the body's presentation was a form of dignity even when the interior circumstances were not dignified. Her hands were clasped in front of her. My father came in behind her. He was 64. He moved through the door with the specific quality of a man who has spent his life being competent and is currently navigating the specific humiliation of a situation that has exceeded his competence. His eyes moved across my office, the desk, the framed credentials on the wall, the view through the window, the evidence of a professional life that had been built in the years when he was not looking. They stopped moving when they reached my face. He looked at me for a long moment. "Amara," he said, my name with a quality I had not heard from him in a very long time. Not the ambient weight of the burden years, something more exposed. "Dad," I said. "Sit down, both of you." I sat across from them, not behind my desk, which would have established a professional distance I did not want, but in the chairs arranged for client conversations. At the same level, in the same configuration I used when I wanted someone to feel they were being met rather than managed. "Abina called me," I said. My mother's composure held. "We were going to..." She started. "I know," I said. "You were going to figure it out. You've always figured it out." I paused. "Tell me about the supplier situation, from the beginning." "All of it." My father looked at his hands, then he looked at me, and he told me. It took 40 minutes of my father, who had never, in my memory, asked anyone for help with anything that mattered, walking me through 3 years of a business he had built with the same focused determination he had brought to everything in his life. And the 6 months in which a supplier relationship had shifted from reliable to exploitative to, finally, legally precarious. The supplier was based in Accra. The contract had been verbally modified in ways that were not reflected in the written documentation. When my father had attempted to exit the arrangement, the supplier had initiated a claim that was, in Abina's estimation and now in mine, largely without merit, but sufficiently structured to create a process that my father had neither the legal resources nor the cross-jurisdictional knowledge to navigate alone. He needed a lawyer. He needed a financial restructuring of the business to protect the assets he had built, while the legal process resolved. He needed someone who understood how money moved across the specific geography of his situation. He needed, in other words, exactly what I had spent 5 years building the capacity to provide. I listened to all of it. I did not interrupt. I did not, in the 40 minutes of his account, make any reference to any previous conversation or any word that had been used in any previous year. I listened as a professional listens, with the full attention of someone whose job is to understand a situation completely before responding to it. When he finished, the office was quiet. My mother was looking at the window. My father was looking at his hands again. I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, "I can help with this." My mother looked at me. "The legal situation," I said. "I'm going to refer you to a colleague who specializes in cross-border commercial disputes and who I trust completely. I will personally brief her on the situation, and she will take the case at a rate I will negotiate on your behalf." I paused. "The financial restructuring, I'll handle that myself. We'll protect what your father has built, and we'll do it correctly." My father looked up from his hands. Amara, he said. His voice had something in it that I had not heard before. Not the ambient weight. Not the careful management of a man rationing his emotional expenditure. Something more open. We can't pay your rates. Whatever you charge, we can't. You're not a client, I said. You're my parents. The office was very quiet. My mother's composure did not hold. It did not shatter dramatically. She was not a woman who shattered dramatically. But something in her face moved, in the specific way of someone whose careful architecture has encountered something it was not built to resist, and her eyes filled with the particular tears of a woman who has spent a long time being strong and has been unexpectedly met with something stronger. Amara, she said, what you've built here is mine, I said, quietly, without heat. I built it, yes. She was quiet. We didn't, she started. I know, I said. I know you didn't know. We said things, she said, when you were young. When the money was. I know what you said, I said. A silence. I know you did the best you knew how to do, I said. I know the pressure was real. I know crossing an ocean and working positions below your qualification and doing all of it while raising a child that the money never quite stretched to. I know that was hard. I paused. I also know the word you used, and I need you to know that I know it, not to hurt you. Just, I need you to know that I carried it, and I built this anyway, despite it. My mother was crying quietly. My father had not moved. You should have been told, he said finally, from the beginning, that you were worth everything we had and more, that the cost was not your fault and the burden was never yours. He stopped. I am sorry, Amara, for every time I made you feel like the weight was your fault. The office was completely still. I sat with the apology for a long moment, the real kind, the undecorated kind, the kind that arrived without agenda from a man who had spent 64 years not saying it. I know, I said. Thank you. We sat in the quiet of that for a moment. Then I picked up my notebook. Tell me more about the supplier contract, I said. I want to understand every clause. And my father, the man who had sighed at second portions and calculated the cost of my university before he celebrated my acceptance, leaned forward in his chair and began to explain, and I listened with the full focused attention of someone who had built specifically this capacity and was now applying it to exactly the right problem. The legal situation resolved in 4 months. My colleague handled it with the precision I had expected, and the supplier's claim was dismissed with a cost settlement that was significantly below what my father had feared and structured in a way that protected the business's operational continuity. The financial restructuring took 6 weeks. I did it myself, evenings and weekends. The way I had built everything before the firm was large enough to carry itself. My father's business emerged from it, leaner and more correctly structured, and with a clear operational pathway for the next 3 years. He came to the office on the day we finished the restructuring, came specifically, not as part of another errand, but to come. He sat across from me at the same chairs where we had sat on that Tuesday morning. He looked around the office again, more slowly this time, with the attention of someone who has decided to actually see what they are looking at. 40 million, he said. Abina told me. Assets under management, just over, I said. You built this, he said. Yes, I said. He was quiet, I thought. He stopped. I thought the burden was a statement about you, about your capacity, about what you could carry. He paused. I understand now that it was about me, about what I could carry, about what I could see. I looked at my father, 64 years old, an engineer who had arrived on a continent that didn't recognize his credentials and had built a life anyway, who had used the word burden because he didn't have another word for the gap between what his love for me required and what his capacity could provide. I know, I said. You built more than I could see, he said. I built more than I could have told you about, I said. And now you know. He nodded slowly. Then he did something my father had not done since I was small enough to sit on his shoulders at the Saturday market. He reached across the space between the chairs and took my hand. He held it for a moment. He let it go. Good, he said. Just that. Just good. It was. From my father, everything. Before you go, I have to ask you something, and I want your honest answer in the comments. When your parents come to you for help after years of making you feel like a burden, do you help them? Or does love have limits? This is the question that divides people most deeply, and I genuinely want to know where you stand. Tell me right now. The comments are open. If this story reached something inside you, if you have ever carried a word someone gave you that was never yours to carry, hit that like button so this story finds every person who needs to hear it today. Share it with someone who built something extraordinary while the wrong people weren't watching. And if you believe that the most powerful response to being called a burden is to build something that carries everyone, subscribe, because every week this channel tells the stories of people who were handed the wrong words and built the right life anyway. Do not miss what is coming next week. Your first month of Audible is completely free. Over 500,000 titles waiting in the description below. For the ones who carried words that weren't theirs. For the ones who built anyway. The link is right there. Use it.